He's the most feared alpha alive, until he fell asleep on her shoulder. I was the one holding the spear that night, so I am the one who has to tell you what I saw, because no one else will say it out loud. It was past the second bell. The hall was empty except for the two of them and me, pretending to guard a door no one was trying to come through. He had not slept in 19 days. We counted, all of us, the way you count a fever. And then his head went down, just like that, onto her shoulder like it belonged there, like it had been waiting its whole life for that one spot. She didn't move. She didn't even breathe right, I think. And the most feared man in 6 kingdoms, the Alpha King of Ashvale, who once put his hand through a man's chest for spilling wine on his boots, slept like a child who had finally been allowed to stop holding his own head up. I have served 3 alphas. I have never seen anything like it. I still don't know what to call it. She wasn't anyone before that. That's the part people forget when they tell this story later, all polished up, like it was always going to happen. Kara of the lower wing, healer's girl, hands that smelled of beeswax and crushed yarrow because she spent her days stitching soldiers back together in a room with no windows. She had a burn on her wrist shaped like a crescent moon, from a kettle she'd pulled too fast at 11 years old. And she rubbed it without knowing she did it, the way some people bite their nails. Nobody in that keep would have looked at her twice. Nobody did. The king they looked at, Idris, third of his name, Alpha of the Ashvale pack, had not lost a fight since he was 19 years old, and there was a streak of gray at his right temple that hadn't been there 2 years before, sitting strange against hair black as pitch, like frost laid down early on one corner of a field. He did not sleep, not because he didn't want to, because his wolf wouldn't let him. That is where this story actually begins, not with the shoulder, with the not sleeping. There had been 3 attempts on his life in 3 weeks. Poison in the wine, which his taster died proving. A blade through a servant's passage that missed his spine by the width of 2 fingers. A fire set beneath his own chambers that he only survived because his wolf smelled the smoke before the flames found wood enough to roar. 3 weeks of a king who flinched at doors closing, who ate standing, who paced the length of his own war room so many nights running that the stone had begun to wear paler under his boots than anywhere else in the castle. The conclave of the Iron Moon was 9 days out. Every 9 years, the packs gathered, and any alpha strong enough could call a challenge in the old way. Blood, not politics, and take the throne if he won it. An alpha worn thin from sleeplessness, jumping at shadows, was an alpha who could be challenged and beaten. Everyone at court knew it. Most of them were doing the arithmetic out loud, in low voices, behind hands that didn't quite cover their mouths. So when the king's personal healer fell ill that same week, bad luck, or someone's plan, no one ever did prove it either way. The duty of tending the royal chambers fell, by simple accident of who happened to be standing closest with clean hands, to a girl who had never once been alone in a room with him. Mistress Yu, the old healer who'd trained Kara since she was 9, had one eye gone milk white years ago from a fever that nearly killed her too, and she looked at Kara out of the good one with something close to pity the morning she sent her up. "Keep your eyes down," Yu told her. "Speak only when spoken to. Touch nothing that isn't a wound." "He doesn't have a wound," Kara said. "He will," Yu said, "if you give him a reason to think you're a threat. Men like that don't sleep because they've stopped trusting the shape of a room. Don't make yourself a shape he has to watch." Kara had nodded and gone, and that should have been the whole of it. 1 girl, 1 tray of salves, 1 quiet hour, forgotten by supper. It wasn't. The first time she saw him up close, he was standing at the window with his back to the door, and she almost left the tray and herself out of the room without a word. Because something about the line of his shoulders told her this was not a man who wanted company. He turned before she could decide. His eyes found her face and didn't leave it. The way a man checks a blade is still sharp before he trusts it near his throat. "You're not you," he said. No, my lord. Where is she? Fevered. I brought her tonics instead. He looked at the tray like it might be the thing that killed him, which, given the last 3 weeks, was not an unreasonable thought to have. Leave them, he said. And yourself, with them. She set the tray down. Her hands didn't shake, which surprised her more than it should have. You're not afraid of me, he said. It wasn't a question. It sounded almost like an accusation. I'm terrified of you, she said. I'm just better at standing still than most people. Something moved at the corner of his mouth that was not quite a smile and gone before it became one. Good, he said. Stillness I can use. C didn't sleep that night either, but he didn't send her away for 3 hours, and that, in itself, was already more than anyone else in that keep had been given in 19 days. By the 4th night, it had stopped being unusual for her to be in that room, and started being something the rest of the court noticed. The 4th night was the night it happened. The thing the guard at the door would still be talking about, years later, the thing that gave this story its name, before anyone had agreed, there was a story to name. She was changing the dressing on his forearm, a graze from a blade 3 nights gone, that he hadn't bothered to mention until it started to redden at the edges, and he was sitting very still, the way he always sat when she had her hands on him, like a man holding his breath underwater. She talked while she worked because you had taught her that talking kept a patient's mind off the pain, and she'd run out of careful court phrases 2 nights before, so what came out now was just true. You're not eating enough, she said. I'm aware. You're not sleeping at all. Also aware. His voice had gone flat with exhaustion, sanded down to something almost gentle, which was its own kind of frightening, because gentle was not a register she'd expected from him. What does it feel like? She asked. 19 days. He didn't answer for long enough that she thought she'd overstepped, and her hands went still on the bandage, waiting to be told to leave. Like holding a door shut with both hands, he said finally, while something on the other side keeps testing the handle. You can't put the door down. You can't look away from it. You just stand there, holding, until your arms forget what it was like before. She finished the wrap in silence. After that, she was reaching for the basin when his head came down. It landed on her shoulder the way a felled tree lands. Not gently, not gradually, just suddenly there, all that weight she hadn't known to brace for. She froze with the basin still in her hands. His breathing changed within seconds, dropped into something slow. And even she had only ever heard in the wounded after the worst of the fever broke. He was asleep. The Alpha King of Asheville, who had survived 3 attempts on his life inside a month, was asleep on the shoulder of a healer's girl who 2 weeks ago had never been allowed past the outer hall. She sat there for 1 hour and 11 minutes. She counted the bells. She did not move her shoulder, did not shift her weight, did not so much as turn her head, because some animal sense told her that whatever this was, breaking it would cost something neither of them could afford. His hair brushed her jaw. He smelled of leather and old smoke, and underneath that, faintly, of something gone sour with exhaustion, the smell a body makes when it has been running too long on nothing. When he woke, he didn't apologize. He looked at her the way you look at a door you didn't know was unlocked. How long? He said. An hour. A little more. He said nothing else. He stood, straightened his collar with hands that were, for the first time she'd seen, not quite steady, and walked out without looking back at her once. She told no one. She didn't need to. Orrin, the guard at the door with the missing top joint on his smallest left finger, told everyone by morning, because some things are too strange to keep behind your teeth, and by the time the sun was fully up, half the court already knew that the king had slept, actually slept, for the first time in 19 days, and that he had done it on the shoulder of a girl from the lower wing. That was the morning everything in her life turned sideways. Lady Sella found her before noon. Celis had a teardrop-shaped mark beneath her right eye, pale against skin the color of good cream, and she had been the leading name on every list of who might one day stand beside the king as Luna. Chosen not by some mystical bond, but by careful arrangement. By bloodlines and treaties and the kind of beauty that photographed well on a throne, if thrones had photographs. She found Kara in the herb store, smelled of cold rose and something colder underneath it, and smiled with only the left side of her mouth. "I hear you've made yourself very comfortable," Sella said. "I was doing my work." "Your work," Sella repeated, like the word amused her. "Is that what we're calling it?" She picked up a jar of dried yarrow from the shelf, turned it once in her fingers, set it down a few inches from where it had been, a small violence dressed as nothing at all. "Let me be kind, since you clearly don't understand the position you're in. Men like him don't sleep on shoulders that mean nothing. You've made yourself a target without lifting a finger. Half this court would put a knife in your back just to see what happens to him without you propping his head up. The other half would do it out of simple envy. I'd start sleeping with your door barred if I were you." "Is that a threat?" "It's an education," Sella said, and left before Kara could decide whether to believe her. It wasn't only Sella. Within 2 days, Kara found her tonics tampered with twice. The second time with enough nightshade in the base that you, fever-broken and furious, said flatly that someone had meant for the king to be the one to drink it, with Kara as the most convenient hand to hang the blame on after. A guard who had never spoken to her before started finding reasons to walk the lower wing corridor at the hours she crossed it, watching her in a way that had nothing to do with duty. A serving girl, she'd known 6 years, stopped meeting her eyes in the kitchens. She had become, in the space of one unguarded hour, the most envied and the most endangered person in Hallowmere, and she had done nothing at all to earn either. "You should ask to be reassigned," you told her, low in the dispensary, hands moving fast over a mortar she didn't need to be grinding so hard. "Kitchens, laundry, anywhere he isn't. I can make it happen by tonight." "He sleeps when I'm there," Kara said. "He doesn't, when I'm not. That's not your debt to pay. Nobody else can pay it," Kara said and heard, only after she'd said it, how much it sounded like she'd already decided something she hadn't let herself decide out loud. She went back that night anyway. He was at the window again, the way he always was, like a man who'd taught himself that windows could be watched and doors couldn't, not both at once, and he turned when she came in with a look that was almost, not quite, relief. "You came back," he said. "You'd have noticed if I hadn't." "I notice everything," he said. "It's the problem." She set down the tray. Her hands, this time, did shake, just slightly, and he saw it, because of course he saw it. He saw everything. That was the whole curse of him. "Someone's been threatening you," he said. "Not a question this time either. It's nothing I can't manage. That's not what I asked." "No one's hurt me," she said, which was true, in the sense that mattered least. He crossed the room. He didn't touch her. He never touched her first, not once. Not in all the nights that came after this one. But he stood close enough that she had to tip her head back to keep his eyes, and his voice dropped to something low enough that it felt like it belonged only to the two of them, and no one else in the keep. "If anyone touches you," he said, "I will end them before they finish the sentence explaining why they thought it was a good idea." "That's not reassuring," she said. "That's a man telling me I'm now a reason for more bloodshed." "It's the only currency I have," he said, and something in the way he said it. Flat, almost embarrassed, a king admitting the limits of his own gifts, undid her more than any softer thing he could have offered. He didn't sleep that night. 3 nights, in fact, came and went where his head stayed up, his eyes red-rimmed, his hands trembling faintly when he thought no one could see, because the fear that had kept her safe, that he would burn down anyone who touched her, had also made him watch the doors twice as hard, watch her twice as hard, and a door watched twice as hard never lets a man rest. It was Bran who finally said out loud what no one else would. Bran had been beta of the Ashvale pack for 11 years, had a notch missing from the upper curve of his left ear, from a fight he'd never once explained to anyone. And he did not trust easily, did not trust at all, in fact, which was precisely why what he said mattered. He cornered Kara in the corridor outside the king's chambers on the 7th night, arms crossed, voice pitched low enough not to carry. "I don't like this," he said. "I didn't ask you to. He hasn't slept since you stopped coming for 3 days. Did you know that?" "I know." "Then you understand what I'm about to ask you." Bran's jaw worked once, like the words cost him something to let out. "I need to know if this is real, or if you're playing a longer game than the rest of them. Because if it's a game, girl, I will end it myself, and I will not feel sorry about it after." "It isn't a game," she said. "Then what is it?" She didn't have an answer for him. She didn't have one for herself yet either, which was, in its own way, the truest thing she could have said. So she said nothing at all, and Bran studied her face for a long moment before he stepped aside and let her pass, unconvinced, but no longer actively in her way, which from a man like Bran was nearly an apology. What none of them knew, what even Idris hadn't told her yet, hadn't told anyone, was that the not sleeping had a shape underneath it that had nothing to do with assassins at all, or not only with assassins. That was the thing waiting to come apart, at the center of all this. The thing that would change what everyone, including the viewer sitting with this story now, thought they understood about why a king who feared nothing had started to fear his own bed. It came apart on the 9th night, 4 days before the conclave. He hadn't slept in 5. His hands shook openly now, no hiding it, and there was a wrongness in his eyes that Kara recognized from soldiers in the infirmary who had gone too long past their limits. Not madness, not yet, but the country just before it, where a man's own nerves start telling him things that aren't true. He'd snapped at Bran twice that day over nothing. He'd thrown a goblet at a wall for the crime of a servant knocking too loudly. You met Kara at the dispensary door before her shift, face grim under the candlelight, the milk-white eye catching the flame strangely. "I need to tell you something," you said, "and I need you to understand I should have told you 9 days ago. Tell me now." There's an old word for what you might be to him, not mate. Don't think mate. I watched your face just now, and no, it isn't that, or it isn't only that, and the difference matters more than you know. Yu's hands twisted the edge of her apron. "There's a kind of scent, rare as a frost in summer, that can still a wolf gone wild with grief or fear. Healers used to call it a stilling scent. Half the old texts think it's a story mothers made up to comfort themselves when their sons went to war. The other half think it's real, and worse than real, because the wolves who find it can't sleep without it ever again. You're saying, I'm what? Medicine. I'm saying his wolf has been standing guard with no one to relieve it for 19, 20, 30 nights, and somewhere in that, it found a scent it trusts enough to stand down for. Yours. That's not a small thing, child. That's the rarest thing I've heard of in 40 years of healing, and I do not know if it is a blessing or a death sentence. And I am ashamed to tell you, I do not have time anymore to find out gently. Look at him. He is running out of nights. It should have terrified her more than it did. Instead, for one strange suspended moment, it explained everything. The way his head had dropped, total and immediate, the way he'd said you came back like it meant the difference between standing and falling. Not fate. Not some bond written into the stars before either of them was born. The kind every fireside story in this realm liked to promise. Just a wolf, worn raw and alone, that had found one scent in the whole world it could finally stop fighting. That was the moment the viewer who'd come expecting a fated mate, an old prophecies, a destiny owed to her by the universe, should feel the ground shift. There was no prophecy here. There was only a girl who happened, by no design of stars or blood, to smell like safety to a man who had forgotten what safety smelled like. And that was so much more frightening and so much more precious because it meant none of it was owed, it could be lost. It had to be kept, on purpose, every single night, by choice. What happens, Kara asked, if I'm not there? If I get reassigned, or hurt, or… I don't know, Yu said. I have never seen the texts say what happens after. I only know what they say happened to the last woman who carried this scent, 3 generations back, under the old king's father. What happened to her? Yu's good eye dropped to the floor, and she didn't answer, and that silence dropped into the room like a stone into still water, was the question Kara would carry, unanswered, all the way to the end of this story. She went to him that night, not knowing what she carried, only that she carried something, and that frightened her more than any blade Sela had implied was waiting in the dark. He was at the window, of course. He turned, and the moment his eyes found her, something in his shoulders dropped half an inch, the way a held breath finally lets go. You look like you've heard something, he said. I have. Tell me, she told him. All of it, the stilling scent, the old word, Yu's silence at the end. He listened with his back very straight, his jaw working, and when she finished, he was quiet long enough that she thought she'd broken something between them just by saying it out loud. I knew, he said finally. You knew? Not the word for it, not the why. He turned fully to face her, and for the first time, she saw something close to shame cross a face that had never once in 9 days shown her anything but command. I knew the night it happened that it wasn't an accident, what my body did on your shoulder. I told myself it was. I let you believe it too, because the alternative was admitting I'd become the kind of man who needed someone to survive his own mind. And I have spent 11 years making sure no one in this kingdom ever thought that of me. That's not weakness, she said. Tell that to a conclave full of alphas who'd take my throne the second they smelled it on me. His voice had an edge now, a rawness underneath the command. Tell that to Sela, who's already half convinced the court I keep you near me as a weakness she can exploit. You think I don't know what you've cost yourself, standing in this room with me? I have watched you get threatened for 9 days, and done nothing but tell you I'd kill anyone who touched you, which is not the same as keeping you safe. And I know it, and I let it happen anyway, because I am too tired and too selfish to send you away. It was the most honest thing he'd said to her, and the most disappointing one too. Because underneath the confession was a simple, ugly truth. He had known the cost she was paying and chosen his own relief over her safety anyway, every night, without telling her the shape of the danger she stood in. You should have told me, she said. I know. You should have let me choose, knowing what it was. I know that too. He didn't defend himself further. That, at least, she could give him. He didn't dress it up as anything other than what it was. I'm choosing anyway, she said, after a silence that stretched long enough to ache. But I needed to be the one who said it, not you, deciding it for me by staying quiet. He crossed the room then, slower than before, the way a man moves when he's not sure he's allowed to keep coming, and stopped close enough that she could feel the heat off him, could smell smoke and leather, and, underneath, the particular sourness of too many nights without rest. He didn't touch her face. He raised one hand and stopped it an inch from her jaw, hovering there, asking without asking, and she was the one who closed the last of that distance, tipping her cheek into his palm. His hand was shaking, not from fear of her, from everything else. I am so tired, he said very quietly, like the words cost more than any threat he'd ever made. I know, she said. Sit down. I'll stay. He slept 4 hours that night, longer than he had in 3 weeks combined, and when he woke he didn't pull away from her first this time. He stayed a moment, just breathing, before he remembered he was a king and made himself sit up. The seed Yu had planted that night. What happened to her, the last woman with this scent, 3 generations back, went unanswered for 10 more days, sitting at the back of every scene that followed like a held note, because there wasn't time to chase it. The conclave was 4 days out, and the court had stopped pretending to be subtle about what they thought of Kara's place in it. Sela found her again, this time in the corridor outside the king's hall, and this time the smile didn't reach even one side of her mouth. "You think this makes you safe," Sela said. "I never thought that. Good. Because it doesn't. It makes you a problem with a face. And problems with faces get solved." She stepped close enough that Kara could smell the cold rose again, sharper now, almost desperate, underneath the perfume. "Do you know what happens to this pack if he goes into that conclave weak, surrounded by rumors that he can't rule his own bed, let alone his own throne? Do you know what happens to every person in this keep? Every soldier? Every child in the lower wing, if some alpha twice his size decides he's ripe for the taking? I was promised to him for 9 years, girl. Not for love. For exactly this, to stand beside him and be a wall nobody could find a crack in. You are the crack." It was the closest Sela had come to honesty, and for one strange moment, Kara almost understood her, almost saw, underneath the cruelty, a woman who had spent 9 years training to be useful to a kingdom, and now watched a healer's girl undo the careful architecture of that usefulness without even meaning to. It didn't make Sela kind. It made her, for one breath, human, which was somehow worse, because it meant the danger she represented wasn't simple malice Kara could brace against. It was fear dressed up as cruelty, and fear doesn't stop just because you understand it. "I'm not trying to take anything from you," Kara said. "You already have," Sela said, and walked away before her voice could crack any further than it already had. That night, summoned without warning, Kara stood before the Beta Council in a room with no windows and too many candles, and was asked, plainly, by 3 Betas, including Bran, whether she understood what she was to the king, and whether she had told anyone, and whether she could be trusted to keep what she knew behind her teeth. She was frightened. She will tell you that herself, if you ever meet her, frightened in a way that made the old burn on her wrist throb like it was fresh again, frightened enough that when Bran asked her, directly, "Do you know why he sleeps only near you?" she heard herself say, "No, I don't know why." It was a lie. She knew. She had known for days. But the truth felt like handing them a blade with the hilt turned toward Sela, toward every rival alpha who'd give a fortune to know. The king's strength had a single unguarded weak point with a face and a name, and so she lied, and told herself it was to protect him, and didn't examine too closely whether it was also to protect herself. Bran didn't believe her. She saw it land in his face, the disbelief, and watched him decide. Right there, not to push it. Not out of trust, but out of something more practical. If she was lying to protect a secret, better that secret stay buried than dragged into a room with 3 Betas and too many candles. He let it go. But the lie did its damage anyway, the way lies do, quietly, at a distance, days later. Because the council, unconvinced of her reliability, voted that night, without telling her, without telling Idris until it was already moving, to reassign her duties for the week of the conclave. Too great a risk, they said, to keep an unvetted, unsworn girl, with unclear value at the king's side during the one stretch of days when every rival pack would have eyes inside Halomir's walls. She would tend the wounded in the lower hall instead, far from his chambers, starting the very night before the conclave's opening feast. The one night, of all nights, he most needed her there. She found out an hour before it took effect. She ran. She does not pretend, telling this story now, that she ran out of duty alone. She ran because something underneath her ribs had started insisting, days ago, that this man's rest belonged to her now, whether she'd agreed to that wait or not. And the thought of him alone in that room, wolf clawing at the door he'd been holding shut for weeks, was unbearable in a way that had stopped being about politics entirely. She didn't reach him in time to stop the order. She did reach him in time to be standing in the doorway when Bran delivered it himself, formally, with the particular stiffness of a man doing something he didn't believe in, because the alternative was worse. Idris didn't shout. That was the strangest part. He went very still, the way he did right before his head fell, a stillness she'd learned by now to read as the loudest thing he did. "Override it," he said. "I can't, my lord." The council voted. During the conclave week, their word stands as law, as much as yours. By the old charter, you wrote that clause yourself 11 years ago, for exactly this reason, so no single man's exhaustion could be used against the pack. Then I'm asking you to break it. You taught me not to, Bran said, quiet, almost gentle, which from Bran was its own kind of devastation. I'm sorry, I am. But I watched you sleep for the first time in 3 weeks because of her, and I also watched a room full of people decide they didn't trust why, and I cannot in good conscience hand you a reason for every alpha at that conclave to say you let a stranger closer to your throat than your own sworn beta. 4 nights, Idris. Survive 4 nights. Then she's back. Charter or no charter, I'll see to it myself. 4 nights. It does not sound like much, said out loud in a warm room with candles. It is an eternity. When the alternative to sleep is standing guard against your own mind with nothing left to hold the door. Kara was gone from his chambers by the next bell. She does not remember much of the 4 nights that followed. Only fragments, the way you remember a fever. Stitching wounds in the lower hall with hands that wouldn't quite stop trembling. Lying awake counting the hours she imagined him awake too. 2 wings and 1 staircase away. Close enough that on a quiet night she might have heard a door close. If the keep had been built differently, if the world had been arranged with any mercy in it at all. On the 3rd night, Oren, guard at the door, the missing fingertip, the one who'd told this story first, found her in the lower hall near dawn and said only, "Lo," like he was breaking a rule just by saying it. "He's not eating either now. I know I can't go to him." "I didn't say go to him," Oren said. "I said someone should know." That was the secondary question this story had been carrying, since the night you went quiet about the last woman who'd held this scent. What happens when it's taken away? The viewer who'd been waiting for that answer got it now, in the worst way. It doesn't kill quickly. It starves slowly. A wolf that's found one safe place and lost it again doesn't go back to coping the way it managed before. It goes further down. Idris went 4 nights without a single hour of true sleep, and on the morning of the conclave's opening feast, his hands shook so badly during the welcoming rites that 3 rival alphas, watching from the long table, exchanged a look that needed no words at all. That was the morning Bran broke his own charter. He found Kara before dawn, didn't explain himself, just said, "Come," and walked fast enough that she had to half run to keep pace, and didn't speak again until they reached the king's door. "I'm breaking the law I wrote with him," Bran said. "Don't waste it." She went in. Idris was at the window, always the window, and when he turned, what she saw on his face wasn't relief this time. It was closer to grief, the particular grief of a man who has stopped believing something good was coming and then watched it arrive anyway. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "If anyone—" "Sit down," she said. "We have maybe an hour. Use it." He didn't argue. That, more than anything, told her how far down he'd gone. The king who argued with mountains sat without a single word of resistance, and his head found her shoulder within minutes. Faster than it ever had before, like a man who'd been falling for days and had finally found the floor. He was asleep within the quarter hour, truly asleep, the deep kind, his breathing slow and even, one hand loose and open on his own knee in a way she had never once seen it, not clenched, not ready, just open, the way a hand only goes when its owner has decided, somewhere underneath conscious thought, that nothing in the room means him harm. She had perhaps 50 minutes left to sit there in the gray early light, feeling the weight of his head settle fully into her when she heard it. A sound under the floor, not above it, not a footstep on stone but a give, a faint shift in the boards beneath the old tapestry near the hearth, the kind of sound a building only makes when something is moving through a passage no one is supposed to know exists. Every healer learns to listen for the wrong sound in a quiet room. It's how you catch a wound turning bad before the fever shows in the skin. This was the wrong sound. She knew it in her chest before her mind had finished naming it. She didn't wake him. That decision, made in under 2 seconds with no time to reason it through, is the one she will tell you mattered most in this whole story. Because waking him meant giving the wolf back the door to guard, and the wolf, this deep into exhaustion, side present and barely held, might not have had the strength left to hold it. Waking him might have killed him just as surely as whatever was coming through that wall. So she did the only other thing available to her. She held still, his weight warm and total against her shoulder, and with her free hand, slow, careful, she reached for the only weapon a healer's girl had ever been trusted to carry. The curved bandage blade tucked at her belt, the one she used to cut linen and dead skin, and twice in 9 years to save a soldier's leg. The tapestry near the hearth moved, not the wind. A man's shoulder easing it aside from behind. Careful, slow, the way you move when you've practiced this exact entrance in your head a dozen times. He came through low. In a crouch built for silence, a thin red thread braided into his hair at the nape, catching the gray early light. Casimir, a guard from the eastern wing she'd nodded to 100 times in corridors and never once suspected, a blade already drawn, eyes fixed not on her but on the king's exposed throat, 3 strides away, asleep, unmoving, undefended by anything in that room except a healer's girl with a curved knife meant for bandages. She did not scream. Screaming would have woken him a half-second too late to matter, and a half-second too early to keep the wolf calm enough. Not to lunge blind into a blade aimed at the one place no alpha can heal fast enough from. She moved instead, fast, low, the way you move when there's no time left to be afraid of moving wrong, and put herself between the blade and Idris's throat with nothing but her own body and a knife built for stitches. Casimir's blade came down. She caught it on the curved edge of hers, the impact jarring up through her wrist hard enough that the old crescent scar there screamed, and the 2 blades scraped with a sound like a kettle's whistle cut off mid-note. He was stronger. He was trained for this, and she was not, and the second pass of his blade caught her along the forearm, a line of fire opening before she even registered the cut, blood warm and immediate against her sleeve. Idris woke on the 3rd strike. He woke the way a wolf wakes, not slow, not human, all at once, every part of him arriving in the same instant. And what he saw was the woman whose scent had finally let him rest bleeding from a blade meant for his own throat. Whatever the wolf had been holding back for 3 weeks of careful, agonized restraint came loose in under a second. It was not a long fight after that. It does not need to be told in detail, and this story has no interest in dwelling on the part where a man becomes, briefly, the thing that earned him his name in 6 kingdoms. What matters is what was true before it, and what was true after. Before, Casimir believed he had a clean shot at a king too exhausted to defend himself. After, he did not get the chance to believe anything else. Bran and Oren came through the door at the sound of it, too late to help, and exactly in time to see the king kneeling on the stone beside Kara instead of standing over the man he'd just put down, hands hovering over the cut on her arm with a panic that had nothing composed about it at all. "Don't move," he said. "Don't. Hold still. Let me see." "It's not deep," she said, which was a lie, and they both knew it was a lie, and he made a sound low in his throat that wasn't a word at all, just the noise a man makes when fear finally catches up to him after the danger's already passed. "You should have woken me," he said. "You'd have died faster than I could. You could have died instead." "I didn't," she said, "so we can argue about whether I should have some other day. When you're not bleeding through your own shirt cuff trying to stop my arm from bleeding." He laughed. It cracked in the middle, came out half a sob, but it was a laugh. And it was the first one she'd heard from him in the whole length of this story. Sella arrived not long after, drawn by the noise, and stood in the doorway with her hand pressed to the teardrop mark below her eye, as if she could press the sight of it away. Casimir, her own cousin's husband's man, a name she'd vouched for once, 3 years back, when he'd asked for a posting in the East Wing. She did not say a word in her own defense. She did not need to. The silence did it for her, and so did the way her shoulders dropped, all at once, like a structure giving up its last load-bearing wall. "I didn't order this," she said finally, voice gone thin. "I swear to you, on my own blood, I did not order this." "I believe you," Idris said, not looking up from Kara's arm. "That doesn't mean your fear didn't feed it. You made it dangerous to be near her, every day, for 10 days, in every room you walked into. You don't have to have held the knife to have sharpened it." Sela didn't argue. She had no argument left. She actually knelt, on the cold stone, in front of the whole gathering crowd of guards. And Beatus now filling the doorway, the most carefully constructed woman in that court, bowing her head in a hallway, because there was, for the first time in 9 years of careful arrangement, nothing left to arrange. "I withdraw my name," she said, "from any claim to your throne, your bond, anything. I withdraw it, and I am sorry. I don't expect that to mean anything to her. I would not, in her place, accept it." Kara, holding her own bleeding arm, said nothing for a moment, then said, simply, "It means something. Go cool the wine before someone else bleeds for it today." It wasn't forgiveness. It was the kind of mercy that doesn't ask to be called that, given fast and without ceremony. The way you'd hand someone a cloth for a wound rather than make them ask for it. The conclave opened 4 hours late that day. Idris stood before it with his arm wrapped in the same gauze his own hands had cut for Kara minutes before, sleepless still in body but no longer, for the first time in weeks. Sleepless in the way that breaks a man. Because something in him had finally proven, beyond any rumor or doubt the gathered alphas had carried in with them, that the woman beside him was not a weakness to be exploited, but the reason he was standing there at all. No rival raised a challenge that day. Some debts don't need explaining. The room had just watched one paid in blood and steel, and every alpha present understood exactly what they'd be fighting if they tried. He found her again that night in the small hours, in the room where you had stitched her arm tighter than the field dressing and ordered her to rest. He sat on the edge of the bed without being asked, the way he never had before, like a man who'd stopped waiting for permission to want something. "I have a question I should have asked you 9 days ago," he said. "Ask it now." "You told you about the woman 3 generations back. The last one who carried this scent. She wouldn't tell me what happened to her." Idris was quiet a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had gone careful, the way it only did when something cost him to say. "I asked Bran to find the old records, while you were stitching wounds in the lower hall and I was learning what it cost a man to lose you for 4 nights. She was hidden, the alpha who loved her, and the records say he did, plainly in his own hand, was so afraid of what the court would do with the knowledge that he kept her in a tower wing for the rest of her life and told no one why. She lived. She was never harmed. She was also never once introduced as anything but a servant, not in 40 years, not even at the end." His jaw tightened. He thought that was protecting her. "And you?" "I am done deciding what protects you without asking you first," he said. "That's the whole of my answer. I will not hide you in a tower and call it love. Whatever this is, whatever name the old texts have for it, mate or not, written in the stars, or simply found by an exhausted wolf in a healer's room 9 days too late, I want it known. I want it said in front of every pack that gathered here today. Not because I need them to understand what you are to me. Because I refuse to repeat the one mistake that man made, out of fear, with a woman he claimed to love." "That's not a small thing to offer," she said. "It puts a target on me as plainly as it puts a crown near me." "It does," he said. "I won't pretend otherwise to make it easier to accept. I'm asking you to choose it anyway, eyes open, the way you should have been allowed to choose 9 days ago, before I let my own exhaustion decide for both of us." She looked at the bandage on her arm. The new line that would sit beside the old crescent scar on her wrist for the rest of her life. 2 marks now instead of 1. Both of them proof of something that had cost her real blood to keep. "I already chose," she said. 9 days ago, when I went back after the council voted not to send me anywhere near you. I just didn't say it out loud where it could be used against me. I'm saying it now. Not because your wolf needs me to sleep. Because I want to be in that room whether you're sleeping or not." He didn't answer with words. He leaned down, slow, the way he'd learned to move around her without rushing the things that mattered, and kissed her like a man finally setting down a door he'd been holding shut with both hands for far too long, careful and grateful and entirely undone. There was no grand announcement scene to close this story. No crowd parting, no crown lowered onto her head while trumpets played. That isn't how it happened, and this story has no interest in lying to you about that now. After telling you the truth through every harder part of it, what happened was smaller and somehow larger for being so. 3 weeks after the conclave, with Sela gone north to her family's lands and Casimir's fate settled quietly, with mercy, the way Idris had promised it would be, Kara was given a title that meant almost nothing in the old charter, and everything in the way it was spoken. Keeper of the King's Rest, a phrase someone in the court records office had clearly enjoyed, writing more than any other line they'd drafted that year, and a room of her own beside his chambers, instead of 2 wings and a staircase away. She still rubs the crescent scar on her wrist sometimes, when she's anxious, an old habit 9 years of healing never quite cured. He's learned to notice when she does it, and to ask, simply, what's wrong, instead of assuming he already knows. He still doesn't sleep easily on his own. Some nights the wolf still tests the door out of old habit, the way a body remembers a wound long after it's closed. But there is a room now, in the heart of the most fortified keep in 6 kingdoms, where the most feared man alive lays his head down on purpose, not because he has to, not because some prophecy demanded it of him before he was born, but because one night, 9 years too late and exactly on time, he found the one place his guard was finally allowed to come down. And a woman who had never once asked to be anyone's medicine chose, with her eyes open and a knife in her hand, to be his peace instead. That's the whole of it. That's why he fell asleep on her shoulder, and why, of everyone in that keep who could have killed him in the hour he finally rested, it was the same shoulder that stood between him and the blade. I told you I was the one holding the spear that night. I still am, some nights, standing outside that door. I don't watch for danger the way I used to. Mostly, now, I just listen for the sound he makes when he finally sleeps. Slow and even, and entirely unafraid. And I think every time that I am standing guard over the only thing in this whole hard kingdom that never once needed a crown to be worth protecting.